My name is Cassandra Michelle. I'm 28 years old, and I never imagined I'd be standing in a doorway during a storm, clutching my feverish 3-week-old son while watching my parents load my sister Rebecca's luggage into their car. No was burning up, the power was out, and I was begging them not to leave us alone. My sister's flight to her job interview apparently mattered more than our safety. That moment redefined family for me forever. Before I tell you how my own parents left me stranded with my newborn son, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about family loyalty being put to the test. 6 months before that terrible night, my life looked completely different. I was thriving in my marketing career at a digital agency in Chicago, where I'd worked my way up to senior account manager over 5 years. My husband Ryan and I had just celebrated our 4th wedding anniversary with a weekend getaway to Michigan wine country. It was during that trip, overlooking Lake Michigan at sunset, that we finally felt ready to start our family. "I think it's time," Ryan had said, squeezing my hand as we watched the orange sun melt into the water. At 30, he'd established himself as a project manager for a construction company, and our finances were finally stable enough for me to potentially take extended leave. "I'm scared," I admitted, "but I think I'm ready too." We'd started trying immediately, and to our surprise, I got pregnant within 2 months. The first ultrasound showing that tiny flickering heartbeat had brought tears to both our eyes. We'd spent evenings debating names, planning the nursery, and dreaming about who our child would become. Those early months of pregnancy were filled with an almost magical anticipation. But complications arose during my second trimester. At 24 weeks, I started experiencing contractions. The doctor diagnosed me with placenta previa and put me on bed rest. Those months of restriction were much harder than I'd anticipated mentally, emotionally, and physically. Ryan did his best, cooking meals and keeping the apartment clean while working full-time, but I could see the strain in his eyes. "I'm sorry I'm such a burden," I told him one night as he brought me dinner in bed. "You're growing our son," he said firmly. "That's the opposite of a burden." No, Thomas Michelle was born 3 weeks early after a grueling 26-hour labor that ended in an emergency C-section when his heart rate dropped dangerously low. When they finally placed him in my arms, 6 pounds, 4 ounces of wrinkled perfection with Ryan's dark hair and what looked like my nose, the physical pain faded into the background. I'd never experienced love so immediate and overwhelming. The first few days in the hospital were a blur of visitors, nurses, lactation consultants, and very little sleep. Ryan stayed with us the entire time, sleeping awkwardly in the hospital recliner. When we brought No home, the reality of caring for a newborn hit us full force. No wouldn't latch properly, leaving my nipples cracked and bleeding. I pumped instead, setting alarms throughout the night. He seemed to cry constantly unless he was being held. My C-section incision throbbed with every movement. Showering became a luxury. Eating a hot meal seemed like a distant memory. Ryan had managed to get 1 week of paternity leave, and those 7 days flew by in a sleep-deprived haze. The night before he had to return to work, I found myself panicking. "I don't think I can do this alone," I whispered as we both stared at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, No finally asleep between us in the bassinet. "You're not alone," Ryan assured me. "I'll help before and after work. We'll figure it out." But the reality was harder than either of us had imagined. Ryan would leave for work at 6:30 in the morning and often wouldn't get home until after 7 at night. I found myself alone for 12 hours or more with a newborn who seemed inconsolable for much of that time. My body was still healing, my hormones were all over the place, and sleep deprivation made everything worse. That's when I started thinking about asking my parents for help. Thomas and Martha Michelle lived about 40 minutes away in the suburbs, both retired now, my father from his accounting practice and my mother from elementary school teaching. They'd visited the hospital after Noah was born and had stopped by once since we'd been home, bringing a casserole and staying for about an hour. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. They loved me, and I never doubted that, but my younger sister Rebecca had always been the clear favorite. 3 years younger than me, Rebecca was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, charming, the life of every party. Where I was responsible and methodical, Rebecca flitted from interest to interest, job to job. She'd drop by our parents' house unannounced and leave with checks to cover her rent or car repairs. Meanwhile, I'd worked 2 jobs to put myself through college, never wanting to burden them. When I called to ask if they might be able to help me for a few days, especially since Ryan had a 3-day business trip coming up, my mother had sounded surprisingly enthusiastic. "Of course we can help, you can stay here. It'll be easier than us coming to your apartment, and we have more space." I'd felt a wave of relief so intense I'd nearly cried. Maybe this becoming a mother myself would finally put us on equal footing. Maybe they'd see me differently now. When I called Rebecca to tell her I'd be staying at our parents' house, her response had been typical. "That'll be nice for them to have baby time," she said vaguely. "Oh, guess what? I have a final interview for that tech company in Seattle. If I get it, it would literally double my salary." I congratulated her, genuinely happy for her potential opportunity. Rebecca had been working as a graphic designer at a small firm, but had been talking about breaking into the tech industry for years. This seemed like it could be her big break. "When's the interview?" I asked. "Next week, but it's just a video call. If I make it to the final round, they'll fly me out there." Neither of us could have predicted how our situations would collide in the worst possible way. The morning Ryan left for his business trip, I packed what felt like everything we owned: diapers, wipes, burp cloths, swaddles, pacifiers, bottles, pump parts, formula just in case, 5 outfits for Noah, the white noise machine, his medication for reflux, my pain medication, my breast pump, my nursing pillow, and 2 changes of clothes for myself. The car was so full I could barely see out the back window. "Text me when you get there," Ryan said, helping me secure Noah his car seat. "Are you sure you don't want me to cancel this trip? I can tell them it's a family emergency." "We'll be fine," I assured him, though I felt anything but confident. "My parents will help, and it's only 3 days. This client is too important for you to cancel." He kissed Noah's forehead and then mine. "I love you both. Call me anytime, day or night." The drive to my parents' suburban home took longer than usual with a newborn. What should have been 40 minutes stretched to nearly 2 hours with a feeding stop and a diaper change at a gas station bathroom that left me nearly in tears from the awkwardness of balancing a newborn on a tiny changing table while trying to keep him from touching anything. But when I finally pulled into my parents' driveway, the familiar 2-story colonial with its pristine landscaping and American flag fluttering from the porch column brought a wave of relief. This was home. This was where I'd be taken care of, at least for a little while. My father came out immediately, arms outstretched to carry the diaper bag and my suitcase. "There's my grandson," he exclaimed, peering at Noah in his car seat. "Martha, they're here." My mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Bring him in quickly. It's too cold out there for a baby." The warmth of their greeting eased some of the anxiety I'd been carrying. Inside, the house smelled like apple cinnamon. Mom had baked her famous apple crisp. The familiar scent brought back memories of childhood afternoons doing homework at the kitchen table while that same dessert baked in the oven. "I set up the portable crib in your old room," Mom said, leading the way upstairs. "And I put fresh towels in your bathroom." My old bedroom looked much the same as it had when I left for college: pale blue walls, white furniture, and bookshelves filled with well-worn paperbacks and academic trophies. The only difference was the addition of a portable crib where my desk used to be. "This is perfect, Mom, thank you." "Of course, sweetie. Now, why don't you rest while I hold this little angel? You look exhausted." For the first time in 3 weeks, I napped without one ear alert for Noah's cries. When I woke up 2 hours later, I felt almost human again. Downstairs, I found my mother gently rocking Noah while my father recorded a video on his phone. "He's got your eyes," Mom said, not looking up from Noah's face. "The same shape, but that's definitely Ryan's hair," Dad added. "Dark as coal." That evening was one of the most peaceful I'd had since Noah was born. Mom insisted on holding him while I ate a hot meal with both hands, a simple luxury I hadn't experienced in weeks. Dad asked questions about Noah's routine and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. After dinner, they shooed me upstairs for a long shower while they took care of the baby. Standing under the hot water, I felt tears of relief mixing with the shower spray. This was exactly what I had needed: family support, a chance to catch my breath, people who cared about us. But even in that moment of gratitude, I couldn't help noticing things I'd been conditioned to notice throughout my life. The new photos on the stairway wall featuring Rebecca at awards ceremonies and parties. The way my parents mentioned her 3 times during dinner, her new potential job, her recent trip to Miami, her funny Instagram post. The fact that my high school graduation photo had been replaced with one of Rebecca skydiving in New Zealand. I pushed these observations away. I was being sensitive, seeing slats where none existed. My parents were being incredibly helpful, and that's what mattered. The weather report that evening mentioned a potential storm system moving in, but the meteorologist seemed uncertain about its severity. We could see some strong winds and heavy rain in the next 48 hours, or it could move north and miss us entirely, the cheerful woman explained before moving on to sports scores. Should we be worried? I asked Dad as he flipped to another channel. Nah, they always exaggerate these things. Better for ratings, he said dismissively. Besides, we've got the generator if the power goes out. That night, Noah slept in 3-hour stretches, a new record. When he woke at 2 a.m. and then 5 a.m., my mother appeared in the doorway both times. I heard him, she whispered. Let me change him while you get ready to feed him. By morning, I felt more rested than I had in weeks. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe motherhood would finally earn me the approval and attention I'd always craved from my parents. But as the day progressed, Noah became increasingly fussy. His normal newborn cries escalated to shrieking sessions that nothing seemed to soothe. My confidence began to crumble as my parents exchanged concerned glances. He might have colic, Mom suggested, bouncing him with less enthusiasm than before. Rebecca had it too. She cried for 3 months straight. Has he been like this the whole time? Dad asked, his forehead creased with worry. It's so loud. It comes and goes, I said, feeling defensive. He's still adjusting to the world. Outside, the sky had darkened ominously. The wind had picked up, bending the branches of the old oak tree in the front yard. The weather alert on my phone warned of severe thunderstorms, possible flooding, and strong winds. I texted Ryan to let him know the weather was deteriorating but assured him we were safe at my parents' house. As evening approached, Noah's crying intensified, and I could sense my parents' patience wearing thin. Mom still helped, but her suggestions now came with an edge. Maybe he's overtired. Rebecca needed a strict schedule or she'd scream all night. I tried not to compare my parenting to Rebecca's mythologized infancy, but it was hard when it kept being thrown in my face. The power flickered twice during dinner, and Dad went to check the generator in the garage, just in case. The first real crack in my hopeful facade came when my phone rang around 7:30. It was Rebecca. I put her on speaker so I could continue attempting to soothe Noah. Mom, Dad, are you there too? Her voice sounded excited. They moved up my interview. They want me in Seattle the day after tomorrow for an in-person final round. My parents' reaction was immediate and dramatic. Dad let out a whoop of celebration. Mom clasped her hands together. Oh, Rebecca, that's wonderful news. The only problem is this storm, Rebecca continued. I'm checking flats now, and everything tomorrow is already showing delays. I might need to come stay with you tonight so I can get to O'Hare early. The Seattle flight is at 10 in the morning. Of course you can stay here, Mom said without hesitation. Dad can drive you to the airport, no matter how early. As they continued making plans, I felt a familiar sinking feeling. Noah had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep against my shoulder, but their loud excitement threatened to wake him. I carefully stood up and carried him upstairs, away from the noise. In the quiet of my childhood bedroom, I placed Noah in the portable crib and sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the animated conversation continuing downstairs. There was an energy, an enthusiasm in my parents' voices that I rarely heard when they spoke to me. I told myself it didn't matter. I was a mother now with my own family. I didn't need their validation anymore. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain pounding against the window and Noah's hungry cries. The room was dimmer than it should have been, even with the storm outside. When I tried the lamp, nothing happened. "Power's out," my father announced when I carried Noah downstairs. "Has been since about 4 this morning." I tried starting the generator, but it's not working, probably the moisture getting into the engine. "I'll try again when rain lets up." The house was chilly without the heat, and the gray light filtering through the windows created a gloomy atmosphere. Mom was heating water on the gas stove for instant coffee. "Rebecca called," she said as she handed me a steaming mug. "The earliest flight she could get is at 2 this afternoon. She's on her way here now." "The roads are getting bad." I nodded, trying to focus on getting Noah fed and changed in the dim light. The portable bottle warmer I relied on wouldn't work without electricity, so I had to improvise by heating water in a pan and placing the bottle in it. "How long do you think the power will be out?" I asked, testing the milk temperature on my wrist. Dad glanced out the window at the sheets of rain. "Could be's. The whole neighborhood is down. I saw the utility trucks trying to get through earlier, but there's a tree down on Maple Street." My phone chimed with a weather alert. I read it aloud. "Flash flood warning extended until tomorrow morning. Residents advised to avoid all unnecessary travel." "That's going to make getting to the airport tricky," Dad muttered, but I noticed he didn't suggest canceling the plan. Noah was extra fussy that morning, probably sensing the tension in the air. The house grew colder as these passed, and I layered him in an extra onesie and swaddled him tightly. My own shower was a quick, cold affair that left me shivering. When Rebecca arrived around 11, it was like a whirlwind entering the house. She burst through the door in a bright yellow raincoat, her curly hair damp but somehow still perfect. "This weather is insane," she exclaimed, dropping her bags in the entryway. I almost turned around twice. "There's water covering parts of the highway." Instead of expressing concern about her driving in such conditions, my parents fuss over her like she'd returned from war. "You poor thing," Mom exclaimed, helping her out of her wet coat. "Come sit by the fire your father just built. I'll make you some hot soup." "Is your interview outfit dry?" Dad asked, carrying her suitcase upstairs. "We can hang it in the bathroom if it needs to steam out." I sat in the corner of the living room, rocking Noah, feeling oddly invisible despite being the one who had been there first. Rebecca barely acknowledged us beyond a quick, "Hey, Cassie," to baby, before launching into a detailed explanation of the interview process and what this job would mean for her career. As my parents gathered around her, hanging on every word, I noticed how naturally they formed a circle that excluded Noah and me. It wasn't intentional, they didn't push me away, but they also didn't make space to include me either. It was a dynamic so familiar I could have mapped it out in my sleep. When Noah began to fuss again, Rebecca paused her story mid-sentence and gave me a pointed look. "Sorry," I murmured, standing up to take him to another room. "He's probably hungry again. Or maybe he's too cold," Mom suggested, following me to the kitchen. Rebecca was always sensitive to temperature. Remember how she needed those special sleep sacks? I bit back the response that threatened to escape. No, wasn't Becca, and I was tired of the comparison. Instead, I just nodded and prepared another bottle while Mom returned to the living room, where Rebecca had resumed her story. As the afternoon progressed, I overheard my parents discussing the logistics of getting Rebecca to the airport. "The main roads should be clear enough," Dad was saying. "We'll leave extra early to be safe." "What about the flood warnings?" I asked from the doorway, Noah finally asleep against my chest. 3 heads turned toward me, expressions varying from surprised Dad to annoyance Rebecca to concerned Mom. "Rebecca has to make this flight," Mom said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "This interview could change her whole life." "I understand that," I replied, trying to keep my voice even, "but the alerts specifically say to avoid unnecessary travel. They could be dangerous." "This isn't unnecessary," Rebecca countered, her tone defensive. "My entire future depends on this interview. They're not going to reschedule just because of some rain." "Some rain," I echoed, gesturing toward the window where water was now flowing like a river down the driveway. "The power is out," there are flash flood warnings, and you're calling it some rain. Cassandra, my father said, using my full name as he always did when he thought I was being difficult. Your sister needs our support right now. This is important. The unspoken implication hung in the air. More important than you and your baby. I felt heat rising to my face. And what about Noah and me? We're just supposed to sit here in a freezing house with no power while you all risk your lives driving to O'Hare. You'll be fine, Mom said dismissively. The power will probably be back on soon, and Noah has plenty of blankets. It's not like you're alone in some cabin in the woods. You're in a safe neighborhood. The casual disregard for our comfort and safety stung more than I wanted to admit. I looked from face to face, searching for any sign that they understood why I was upset. Finding none, I turned and carried Noah back upstairs, fighting tears the entire way. In my bedroom, I called Ryan, hoping for some reassurance. The call went straight to voicemail. I remembered he had mentioned having meetings all day and might be unreachable. I sent a text and said, "Pow out. Parents planning to drive Rebecca to airport despite flood warnings. Feeling abandoned. Please call when you can." I laid Noah in the portable crib and wrapped myself in the quilt from the bed, trying to stay warm. Through the floor, I could hear the continued conversation about Rebecca's interview, her potential salary, and the exciting life she might have in Seattle. Not once did anyone come upstairs to check on us. By late afternoon, the storm had intensified beyond anything I'd expected. Wind howled around the corners of the house, and rain pounded against the windows with frightening force. Tornado warning alerts kept buzzing on all our phones, advising us to seek shelter in a basement or interior room. Noah had grown increasingly restless, his skin warm to the touch. When I took his temperature with the digital thermometer from my diaper bag, it read 100.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Not dangerously hot, but concerning for a newborn. I brought him downstairs to find my parents and Rebecca huddled at the kitchen table with flashlights, studying printouts of airport directions and alternate routes. "I think Noah has a fever," I announced, my voice tight with worry. "I need to find the infant Tylenol in my bag. Can someone hold him for a minute?" My mother glanced up briefly. "Just put him in the swing, honey. We're trying to figure out the best way to avoid the flooded areas on I-90. The swing doesn't work without electricity," I reminded her, struggling to keep the frustration out of my voice. "And he's sick. I don't want to put him down." Rebecca sighed loudly. "Can't you see we're in the middle of something important here? My flat's in less than 24, and half the roads are underwater. And my 3-week-old has a fever during a power outage," I countered, my patience finally snapping. "I'd say that's pretty important too." Dad looked up, his expression softening slightly. "Give him here," he said, extending his arms. "But make it quick. We need to finish this." I carefully transferred Noah to my father's arms and hurried to the living room where I'd left my diaper bag. As I rummaged through it, looking for the medicine, I could hear Rebecca continuing to talk. As I was saying, if we take the back roads through Westfield, we might avoid the worst flooding, but it'll add at least 30 minutes. My father's response was drowned out by Noah's sudden wail, the high-pitched, desperate cry that always made my heart race. I abandoned the search and rushed back to the kitchen. "What happened?" I asked, reaching for Noah. "Nothing happened," Dad said defensively. "He just started crying." I took Noah back, noticing that his diaper felt heavier. "He needs to be changed, and he's uncomfortable from the fever." "Did you even notice he was wet?" The accusation hung in the air. My mother stood up with a tight smile. "Why don't you change him upstairs? We really need to concentrate on this route planning. Rebecca's interview is tomorrow afternoon," I finished for her. "While my baby is sick right now. He has a slight fever, not pneumonia," Rebecca snapped. "You're being dramatic, and you're being selfish," I retorted. "There's a state of emergency declared, and you're still planning to make our parents drive you through floodwaters for a job interview that could probably be rescheduled." The kitchen fell silent except for Noah's continued crying. My mother's face had gone pale, and my father looked stunned. They weren't used to me pushing back. "I think you need to calm down," my father finally said, his tone measured in that way that had always made me feel small. "The stress of new motherhood is clearly affecting your judgment. Before I could respond, a loud crash came from the backyard. We all jumped. That sounded like a branch on the shed, Dad said, grabbing a flashlight. I'd better check. He disappeared into the mudroom, and Mom turned to follow him. I'll get the tarp from the garage, just in case, she called over her shoulder. Left alone with Rebecca, I bounced no gently, trying to soothe his cries. My sister watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, you could just drive back to your apartment if you're so unhappy here, she said finally, instead of trying to ruin my opportunity. In case you haven't noticed, the roads are flooded, I replied, my voice shaking with anger and exhaustion. And I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm trying to protect my son and our parents from unnecessary danger. Rebecca rolled her eye. There you go again, Saint Cassandra, always doing the right thing and judging the rest of us. I stared at her, bewildered by the unfairness of the accusation. Is that really what you think? That I'm judging you? You always have, she insisted, looking down on me for not being as organized or responsible or perfect as you. Well, guess what? Mom and Dad prefer me anyway, so your moral superiority doesn't count for much. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were true. I had never felt superior to Rebecca, but because the second part confirmed what I had always suspected but tried to deny. My parents did prefer her. And she knew it. Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang. It was Ryan, finally returning my message. Cass, are you okay? I just got your text. The sound of his concerned voice broke something in me. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I tried to explain the situation. No, has a fever, the power's out. Rebecca needs to get to the airport. My parents are going to drive her despite the flooding. I don't know what to do. Slow down, honey, Ryan soothed. Is no okay? His temperature is 100.2. I can't find the Tylenol. That's not dangerously high, but keep monitoring him. Have you tried calling his pediatrician? I hadn't even thought of that, which made me feel like an even worse mother. No, I'll do that now. I'm trying to get home, Ryan continued, but our flight's been cancelled due to the weather. They're booking us on flights tomorrow, but I don't know when I'll make it back. The realization that Ryan wouldn't be home tonight to rescue us sent a fresh wave of panic through me. What should I do? I whispered. Stay put for now. It's safer than trying to drive in these conditions. I'll call you as soon as I know my flight detail. After hanging up, I noticed Rebecca watching me with an unreadable expression. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of concern in her eyes, but it vanished when our parents returned, soaking wet from their brief time outside. A large branch came down on the corner of the shed, Dad reported, removing his dripping jacket. But the structure seems sound. The real problem is the water. It's rising fast in the backyard. The Thompsons' basement is already flooded, Mom added, wringing water from her hair. Alina just texted me. I seized on this news. Then you definitely can't drive to the airport tomorrow. It's too dangerous. My father shot me a stern look. We'll make that decision in the morning based on conditions then. But, enough, Cassandra, he cut me off. Rebecca's flight is at 2. If the main roads are clear enough by late morning, we're taking her. End of discussion. The finality in his voice silenced me, but inside, my anxiety continued to climb. Outside, the storm showed no signs of abating. The wind had reached a constant howl, and water leaked through a corner of the kitchen ceiling, requiring a pot to catch the drips. As darkness fell completely, the house grew even colder. We gathered in the living room where my father had built a fire in the fireplace. It provided our only heat and light, casting long shadows on the walls. Under normal circumstances, it might have felt cozy. Instead, the tension between us made the atmosphere suffocating despite the chill. Noah's temperature had risen slightly to 100.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I had finally found the infant Tylenol and given him a dose, but he remained fussy and uncomfortable. His usual newborn cries had developed a hoarse quality that worried me. He doesn't sound right, I said to no one in particular as I paced the living room floor with him. My mother glanced up from the card game she was playing with Rebecca by flashlight. Babies get colds, Cassie. Rebecca had croup at 6 weeks. Now that was scary. I bit my tongue to prevent another argument, but my patience was wearing dangerously thin. Why did every concern about No have to be compared to some Rebecca anecdote? Why couldn't they just acknowledge that my worry was valid? As the evening wore on, No became increasingly difficult to console. His fever remained, and he refused to nurse or take a bottle. My anxiety spiraled with each passing. Without power, the breast milk I had pumped earlier would soon go bad, and I had only brought a small amount of formula as backup. Around 9 o'clock, another weather alert came through on our phones, its urgent tone cutting through Noah's cries. Flash flood warning upgraded. Severe flooding reported on all major roadways. Residents advised to seek higher ground if low-lying areas. Do not attempt to drive through standing water. I looked up from the alert to find my father already reading it, his brow furrowed in concern. "Dad," I said quietly, "you can't drive tomorrow. It's not safe." Instead of answering me, he turned to Rebecca. "We might need to leave earlier than planned to navigate around the worst areas." "Maybe 6 a.m., Rebecca nodded seriously. "I'll pack everything tonight so we can leave at a moment's notice." It was as I hadn't spoken at all, as if my concern for their safety meant nothing compared to Rebecca's interview. "Are you even listening to me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "The alert specifically says not to drive." "We heard you the first 3 times, Rebecca snapped. "But this interview isn't optional for me. Unlike you with your perfect life and your perfect husband and your perfect baby, I actually need this opportunity." "Perfect," I echoed in disbelief. "You think this is perfect?" "I'm exhausted, in pain from a C-section that's barely healed, trying to care for a sick newborn in a freezing house during a power outage, while my own parents can't be bothered to help because they're too busy enabling your irresponsibility." The room fell silent except for Noah's whimpering. Rebecca's face had flushed red, and my parents looked stunned. I had never spoken to any of them like this before. "That's enough," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're tired and worried about Noah, so I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. But you will not speak to your sister that way in this house." The implicit message was clear. Rebecca was protected. I was not. I clutched Noah closer and turned away, tears streaming down my face as I headed for the stairs. Behind me, I heard my mother say softly to Rebecca, "Don't mind her. Postpartum hormones make women irrational." In my bedroom, I wrapped Noah and myself in every blanket I could find and sat in the rocking chair by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. I must have fallen asleep in the rocking chair because I woke with a start to Noah's frantic cries and the sound of movement downstairs. The room was pitch black, and when I checked my phone, I saw it was just after 5 in the morning. Noah felt worryingly warm against my chest. When I took his temperature again, it had risen to 101 degrees F. My breasts were painfully engorged, but Noah refused to nurse, turning his head away and crying harder. I tried to express some milk manually to relieve the pressure, but it was difficult in the dark, and I was too exhausted and stressed to produce much. Carrying Noah, I made my way downstairs by the light of my phone flashlight. What I saw in the living room stopped me cold. My father was loading several suitcases by the front door. My mother was packing a cooler with sandwiches and drinks. Rebecca stood nearby, dressed immaculately in a navy blue suit, checking items off a list on her phone. All 3 were illuminated by the beam of Dad's heavy-duty flashlight propped on the entryway table. "You're actually leaving?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They all turned toward me, seemingly startled by my appearance. I could only imagine how I looked, hair unwashed, eyes red from crying, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. "The rain has let up a bit," Dad explained, not quite meeting my eyes, "and we checked the traffic reports. Some roads are passable if we leave now before the next band of storms hits." "Noah's fever is worse," I said, holding him out slightly as if they needed proof. "He won't eat. I'm worried about him." My mother approached and placed a cool hand on Noah's forehead. "He is warm," she acknowledged. "But babies are resilient. Keep giving him Tylenol and trying to feed him. We should be back by late afternoon." "Should be," I repeated. "What if you can't get back? What if the roads flood while you're gone?" Then we'll stay at an airport hotel until conditions improve, Dad answered matter-of-factly. Rebecca can't miss this interview, Cassandra. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And my baby's health isn't important, I demanded, my voice breaking. What about the fact that you promised to help me while Ryan is away? We did help you, Mom countered, her tone defensive. You've been here for 2 days, we've held the baby and let you sleep. And now we have to help Rebecca too, Dad added. You're a mother now, Cassie. You need to be more understanding of others' needs instead of just focusing on yourself. The unfairness of this statement left me momentarily speechless. I had spent my entire life being understanding of others' needs, particularly Rebecca's. I had stepped aside countless times to let her shine, had congratulated her on achievements that came easily while I struggled, had never complained when our parents missed my events to attend her. Rebecca was checking her watch impatiently. We really need to go if we're going to beat the worst traffic. My mother hurried to the kitchen and returned with a thermos. I made you some hot tea with honey. It should stay warm for a few hours. There are granola bars in the pantry and some soup you can heat on the gas stove. She was truly leaving, they all were. Please don't go, I whispered, hating the pleading tone in my voice but unable to stop myself. I'm scared to be here alone with him when he's sick. What if his fever gets worse? What if the flooding gets worse and no one can reach us? You're overreacting, Rebecca said with an eye roll. It's a little rain and a low-grade fever. Not exactly life-threatening emergencies. Rebecca, Mom chided softly, but there was no real reprimand in her tone. Dad checked his own watch and grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. We really need to leave now if we're going to make it on time. My mother hesitated, looking between me and Rebecca. For a moment, I thought she might stay behind. But then she sighed and picked up her purse. There's a list of neighbors' phone numbers on the refrigerator if you need anything, she told me. Mrs. Thompson next door is usually home. We'll be back as soon as we can, Dad added, already opening the front door. The sound of rain immediately filled the entryway, though it did seem less intense than before. Rebecca didn't say goodbye. She just grabbed her carry-on suitcase and headed for the door, passing so close to me that her shoulder brushed against mine. I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume as she walked by. In a final, desperate attempt, I moved to block the doorway. No clutched against my chest. His little body felt like a furnace, his breathing more labored than before. I'm begging you, I said, tears streaming down my face. Please don't leave us alone like this. He's sick, I'm exhausted, the power is out, and the storm could get worse again. I need help, please. My father's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I thought I'd gotten through to him. But then he placed a firm hand on my shoulder and gently moved me aside. We'll be back before you know it, he said. Try to get some rest. My mother kissed my cheek quickly. Call the pediatrician if you're really worried. We have service on our phones, so text us updates. And then they were gone, hurrying through the rain to the car where Dad had already started loading Rebecca's luggage into the trunk. I stood in the open doorway, rain blowing in on my face, washing as my sister climbed into the back seat without a backward glance. My mother paused before getting into the passenger seat, looking back at the house with what might have been hesitation or guilt. But then Rebecca said something from inside the car, and Mom quickly got in, closing the door firmly. I stood there as they backed out of the driveway, their headlights cutting through the gray dawn, illuminating the sheets of rain still falling. I stood there as they turned onto the street and drove away, leaving me alone in a powerless house with my sick newborn. Only when they were completely out of sight did I close the door and slide down against it to the floor, No still cradled in my arms. The house felt suddenly cavernous and threatening in its silence and darkness. No's fever-hot skin against mine was my only source of warmth. "It's just you and me now," I whispered to him, wiping tears from my cheeks with my shoulder. "But we'll be okay, I promise." I wasn't sure if I believed my own words, but I knew I had to be strong for No. He was depending on me, even if no one else was. In that moment, sitting on the cold floor of my parents' house, I realized a truth I had been avoiding for years. My parents would always choose Rebecca over me, no matter the circumstances, no matter the stakes. The realization hurt more than I could have imagined, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. If this was the reality, if my own parents could leave me when I needed them most, then I needed to stop expecting anything different. I needed to build my own support system, one that wouldn't abandon No and me when someone more interesting came along. With that thought providing a small measure of resolve, I got to my feet and carried my son into the kitchen to figure out how we were going to survive this day alone. The next few hours were among the most challenging of my life. No's fever continued to rise despite the Tylenol, reaching 102 degrees F by mid-morning. He refused all attempts at feeding, whether breast or bottle, and his crying had taken on a worrying lethargy. I tried calling his pediatrician, but the office's phone system was down due to the power outages affecting the entire region. I texted my mother twice with updates about Noah's condition. Her responses were delayed and brief. Keep trying Tylenol, call doctor if over 103. And later, roads worse than expected. Might stay at airport hotel tonight. The storm had intensified again, contradicting the morning's brief reprieve. Wind rattled the windows so violently I feared they might break. Water began seeping under the back door, creating a slowly expanding puddle on the kitchen floor that I tried to contain with towels. The temperature inside the house had dropped to a bone-chilling cold that no amount of blankets seemed to alleviate. By noon, I was approaching panic. No's breathing seemed more labored, and his normally vibrant skin tone had taken on a concerning pallor. I needed help, but I was effectively trapped. The roads were impassable, emergency services were overwhelmed according to the radio announcements I managed to catch on my battery-powered phone, and my parents were now telling me they might not make it back at all tonight. Looking at Noah's tiny, suffering face, I made a decision. I couldn't wait for my parents or Ryan. I needed to find help now. I remembered my mother mentioning Mrs. Thompson next door. I had only met the elderly neighbor a few times over the years, but she had always seemed kind. With no other options, I wrapped No in multiple blankets, put on the raincoat I'd brought, and prepared to make the short but treacherous journey next door. The moment I stepped outside, I understood why the authorities had been so adamant about people staying indoors. The wind nearly knocked me off my feet, and the rain felt like needles against my skin. The yard between our house and the Thompsons had become a shallow lake, water reaching halfway up my shins as I carefully navigated. By the time I reached their front door, I was soaked through despite the raincoat. I rang the doorbell, unsure if it would work with the power out, and then knocked loudly when I heard nothing. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened to reveal Eleanor Thompson, a silver-haired woman in her 70s, holding a battery-powered lantern. Her eyes widened at the sight of me standing there, drenched and desperate, clutching a bundle of blankets containing my whimpering son. "Good heavens, Cassandra, what are you doing out in this weather?" she exclaimed, pulling me inside immediately. "Where are your parents?" "They took my sister to the airport," I explained, my voice breaking. "No has a fever, and I didn't know what to do. The power's out, and it's so cold, and he won't eat." Mrs. Thompson's expression shifted from shock to determination. "Let me see the little one," she said firmly, leading me to her living room, where a fire burned in the fireplace, actual warmth that made me want to weep with relief. She helped me unwrap No and placed a weathered hand on his forehead. "He's burning up, poor lamb. How high was his temperature last time you checked?" 102, I answered, suddenly afraid I had made a terrible mistake by bringing him out into the storm. Mrs. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "My late husband was a doctor, you know. I picked up a few things over 40 years of marriage. Let's get you both dry and warm, and then we'll figure out what to do about this fever." The next hour was a blur of unexpected kindness. Mrs. Thompson provided dry clothes that had belonged to her daughter, heated water on her gas stove for a warm bath for No, and even produced a bottle of children's liquid ibuprofen that was still within its expiration date from when my grandchildren visit. "We can alternate Tylenol and ibuprofen," she explained as she helped me administer the correct dosage to No. That's what they do in hospitals sometimes for stubborn fevers. As we sat by her fire, No finally asleep in my arms after the warm bath and medicine, I found myself telling Mrs. Thompson everything, not just about the current crisis, but about the lifelong pattern of feeling secondary to Rebecca in my parents. I just don't understand how they could leave, I concluded, fresh tears spilling down my cheeks. He's their grandson, he's sick, I needed them. Mrs. Thompson's face was a study in compassion mixed with indignation on my behalf. I've known your parents for 20 years, Cassandra, and while they're generally good people, what they did today was wrong, plain and simple. Hearing someone else validate my feelings, someone who knew my parents and had no reason to take my side, unleashed something in me. Years of repressed hurt and anger came pouring out in a torrent of words. Nothing I ever do is enough, I confessed. I was valedictorian, got a full scholarship to Northwestern, built a successful career, and they still treat me like I'm invisible next to Rebecca. She drops out of college, bounces between jobs, drains their retirement fund with her emergencies, and they act like she's some sort of genius whose path is just more creative than mine. Mrs. Thompson listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving my face. The worst part, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper, is that I actually believed having No would change things. I thought becoming a mother would finally make them see me as an equal to Rebecca. How naive was that? Not naive, Mrs. Thompson corrected gently. Hopeful. There's a difference. And there's nothing wrong with hoping your parents will love you as you deserve to be loved. She reached over and patted my hand. But Cassandra, at some point, we have to accept people for who they are, not who we wish they would be. Your parents have shown you who they are, maybe it's time to believe them. Her words hit me with the force of revelation. All these years, I had been trying to earn a type of love and recognition my parents were simply incapable of giving me, not because I was unworthy, but because of something lacking in them. What do I do now? I asked, feeling simultaneously lost and somehow lighter. First, we take care of this little one, she replied practically. Then, when the storm passes, you go home to that husband of yours and start building the family you wish you'd had. Not with your parents at the center, but with people who truly see you. As if on cue, No's eyes fluttered open. When I checked his forehead, it felt noticeably cooler. The medicine was working. Would you like to try feeding him again? Mrs. Thompson suggested. Babies often nurse better after a fever breaks. To my immense relief, No latched immediately and nursed hungrily. Washing his little jaw working, his color returning to normal, I felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. I had gotten him through this crisis, me, not my parents. I had found help when he needed it. I was enough. Mrs. Thompson insisted we stay with her until the storm passed, setting up her guest room with fresh linens and even finding an old bassinet in her attic that her grandchildren had used. The power remained out, but her house stayed warm thanks to the fireplace and a small propane heater she used sparingly. That evening, as we sat eating soup she had heated on the stove, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. Made it to airport. Rebecca's flight delayed but should get out tonight. Roads completely flooded now. Staying at airport hotel, how are things? The casual tone, the lack of real concern for No, the absence of any acknowledgement of what they had done, it all confirmed what I now knew with certainty. This pattern would never change unless I changed it. I typed a brief, factual reply. No's fever reached 102. House was flooding. We're staying with Mrs. Thompson. Please let me know when you return. I set the phone down and turned my attention back to Mrs. Thompson, who was telling me stories about her own children, now grown and scattered across the country. They call every Sunday without fail, she said with quiet pride. Not because I demand it, but because we genuinely enjoy talking to each other. That's what I wanted for No and me, a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation and conditional love. And I realized I would need to be the one to break the cycle, to show him what healthy family relationships looked like, even if that meant redefining who I considered family. By morning, the storm had finally passed. Sunlight streamed through Mrs. Thompson's windows, illuminating the waterlogged world outside. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, landing in Chicago at noon. Roads clearing, coming straight to get you. Noah's temperature was normal, and he was nursing regularly again. The crisis had passed, both literally and figuratively. Sitting in Mrs. Thompson's sunny kitchen, washing her coo over Noah as she held him, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The storm had washed away my illusions about my family, but it had also revealed something equally important. I was stronger than I knew. And I wasn't alone, even if the people who should have been there for me had chosen to leave. There were others like Mrs. Thompson, like Ryan, who showed up when it mattered. Those were the people I wanted in Noah's life and in mine. When Ryan arrived a few hours later, concern etched on his face as he took in my exhausted appearance, I felt something shift inside me. This was my real family now, Ryan, Noah, and the circle of friends and neighbors who had proven themselves trustworthy. My parents and Rebecca might still be related to me by blood, but I no longer had to give them the power to hurt me. I could love them from a distance, with boundaries firmly in place. As we packed our things to leave, Mrs. Thompson pressed a piece of paper into my hand. My phone number and email, she explained. I expect regular updates on this little angel, and pictures, lots of pictures. I hugged her tightly, trying to convey the depth of my gratitude for her kindness during my darkest hour. I don't know how to thank you, I whispered. She patted my cheek gently. You already have, dear, by reminding an old woman that she's still needed sometimes. Now go build that beautiful life you deserve. Ryan helped me carry our things to the car, Noah securely strapped in his car seat. As we prepared to drive away, I looked back at my parents' house, water still pooled in the yard, branches scattered across the driveway. Do you want to leave them a note or anything? Ryan asked, following my gaze. I shook my head. No, I'll talk to them when they get back, but not today. Today, I just want to go home. As we drove away, I felt like I was leaving behind more than just the physical space of my childhood home. I was leaving behind the desperate need for approval that had shaped so much of my life. The road ahead wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. My parents returned home the day after the storm, texting to let me know they had arrived safely and asking when we would be coming back. I replied that we had gone home to our apartment, and I would call them soon. I needed time to process everything that had happened and decide how I wanted to move forward. Ryan was furious when I told him the full story of what my parents had done. They left you alone with a sick newborn during a flood, he repeated incredulously. For a job interview. That's beyond irresponsible, that's cruel. Part of me wanted to defend them out of habit, to make excuses for their behavior as I had done my entire life. But I stopped myself. Their actions had been indefensible, and acknowledging that was the first step toward changing our dysfunctional family dynamic. A week passed before I felt ready to face my parents. Ryan offered to come with me for support, but I knew this was a conversation I needed to have alone. When I arrived at their house on a sunny Saturday morning, I was surprised to find both my parents and Rebecca waiting for me. Apparently, she had decided to stay with them while waiting news about the job. There's our little trooper, Mom exclaimed as I carried Noah inside. She reached for him immediately, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't abandoned us during our time of greatest need. I allowed her to take him, washing as she and my father cooed over how much he'd grown in just a week. Rebecca hung back, scrolling through her phone with disinterest. So, did you get the job? I asked her directly. She looked up, surprised by my question. Still waiting to hear. They said they'll let me know by next week. I hope it works out for you, I said sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't wish her ill. Her success or failure didn't affect my worth. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother bounced Noah gently, chattering about how the power had finally been restored and how the flooding had damaged several houses on the block. The Johnsons' basement is a complete loss, she reported, but the insurance should cover most of it. I listened politely, waiting for any acknowledgement of what they had done, any apology for leaving No and me alone during the storm. None came. Finally, when there was a natural pause in the conversation, I took a deep breath and said what I had come to say. I need to talk to you all about what happened last week. My father immediately looked uncomfortable. Cassie, we know you were upset, but Rebecca's interview was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This isn't about Rebecca's interview, I clarified, keeping my voice steady. It's about the choice you made to leave your daughter and grandson alone during a dangerous storm, with no power, while No was sick with a fever. We knew you'd be fine, my mother insisted, though she couldn't quite meet my eyes. You've always been so capable. I needed help, I said simply. I asked for your help, and you chose to leave anyway. Rebecca sighed dramatically. Are we really going to do this? It all worked out, didn't it? No's fine. The house didn't flood. What's the problem? I turned to look at my sister directly. The problem isn't that things worked out. The problem is that they might not have. No's fever reached 102. The water was coming in under the back door. I had to wade through knee-deep water to get to Mrs. Thompson's house because I was terrified my baby was getting sicker and I had nowhere else to turn. My parents exchanged glances, and for the first time, I saw genuine discomfort on their faces. Good. They should feel uncomfortable. If the situation had been reversed, I continued, if Rebecca had needed help and I had an opportunity, would you have left her to help me? The silence that followed was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said quietly. And that's why things need to change between us. My father cleared his throat. What exactly are you saying, Cassandra? I'm saying that I've spent my entire life trying to earn equal standing with Rebecca in this family, and I've finally realized that's never going to happen. And that's okay. I can't change how you feel or who you prioritize. But I can change how much power I give you to hurt me and my son. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We love you, Cassie. We've always loved you. I know you do, I acknowledged. But love without respect and consideration isn't enough. Not anymore. Not now that I have No to think about. I reached over and gently took my son from my mother's arms. I'm not cutting you out of our lives. I want No to know his grandparents and his aunt. But there will be boundaries from now on. Boundaries, my father repeated, as if it were a foreign word. Yes, I won't put myself in positions where I'm dependent on your help, because I now understand that help is conditional. I won't expect you to prioritize No and me, and I won't be hurt when you don't. I'll visit when it works for my family's schedule, not just when it's convenient for you. Rebecca had finally put her phone down and was watching me with a strange expression, surprise mixed with something that might have been respect. I'm not angry anymore, I continued, surprising myself with the truth of that statement. I'm just clear-eyed about who we are to each other. And I'm choosing to focus my energy on the people in my life who have proven they'll be there when I need them. The front door opened then, and Ryan stepped in. We had agreed he would give me 30 minutes alone with my family before joining us. His timing couldn't have been better. Everything okay? He asked, his eyes finding mine immediately. Yes, I said, smiling at him. We're just finishing up. My father stood, extending a hand toward Ryan. Good to see you, son. We were just catching up. Ryan shook his hand but remained by my side, his presence a solid reminder that I wasn't facing this alone anymore. We should probably get going, I said, adjusting No in my arms. He'll need to eat soon, and we have plans this afternoon. Plans? My mother asked, clearly hoping for an invitation to join us. Yes, we're meeting some friends from our birthing class. We've started a little support group for new parents. This wasn't entirely true. We had connected with one other couple but hadn't made formal plans yet. Still, it felt important to establish that we had our own community now. As we prepared to leave, Rebecca approached me while our parents were distracted by Ryan. For what it's worth, she said in a low voice, I didn't realize how sick No was. I wouldn't have insisted on going if I'd known. I studied her face, searching for insincerity but finding none. Thank you for saying that. I hope you get the job, she nodded, seeming unsure how to respond to this new version of me, the one who wasn't competing for our parents' approval anymore. Our goodbye was cordial but restrained. As we drove away, Ryan reached over to squeeze my hand. "How do you feel?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. "Lighter," I finally said, like I put down something heavy I've been carrying for years. In the weeks and months that followed, I remained true to my word about maintaining boundaries. We visited my parents, but less frequently and always on our terms. I no longer expected them to be the support system I needed as a new mother. Instead, I built that support system elsewhere. I joined a mother's group at the local community center, where I met women going through the same challenges and joys that I was experiencing. Ryan and I became closer, our partnership strengthened by the crisis we had weathered together. Mrs. Thompson became a regular visitor to our home, a surrogate grandmother who never failed to show up when invited. Rebecca did get the job in Seattle, and our relationship evolved into something unexpected: occasional text messages, photos shared of Noah's milestones, brief but pleasant phone calls on birthdays and holidays. Without our parents as the center of our relationship, we found we could relate to each other more directly, without the competitiveness that had always characterized our interactions. 6 months after the storm, I received a call from my mother. She sounded hesitant, uncertain. "Your father and I have been thinking," she began. "We wondered if you might want to bring Noah for a weekend visit next month. We could watch him for a few as if you and Ryan wanted to have dinner out." I recognized the olive branch for what it was. Not an explicit apology, they might never be capable of that, but an acknowledgement that they wanted to be part of our lives and were willing to make more of an effort. "That might be nice," I replied, neither eagerly accepting nor coldly rejecting. "Let me check our calendar and get back to you." The old me would have immediately rearranged our plans to accommodate. The new me would consider their request alongside our other commitments and priorities. Noah was thriving, growing into a happy, healthy baby with Ryan's easy laugh and my curious eyes. Watching him discover the world, I often thought about what kind of parent I wanted to be for him. I knew now that the answer wasn't found in replicating my own upbringing or in its complete rejection, but in taking the best parts of my past and combining them with the wisdom I'd gained through experience. I wanted Noah to grow up knowing he was valued for exactly who he was, not for what he accomplished or how he compared to others. I wanted him to understand that love should be reliable and unconditional, not a prize to be earned through achievement or compliance. Most importantly, I wanted him to recognize his own worth, so that he would never accept less than he deserved from the people in his life. The night of the storm had been one of the darkest of my life, but it had also been clarifying. It had shown me who I could count on and who I couldn't. It had forced me to find strength I didn't know I possessed, and it had freed me from the exhausting cycle of seeking approval that might never come. As I placed Noah in his crib that night, watching his eyelids flutter closed, I whispered the truth I hoped would shape his life as it was now shaping mine. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's in you already, whole and complete. My job is just to help you see it. I realized then that this was perhaps the most valuable lesson my parents had inadvertently taught me, not through their presence and support, but through their absence when I needed them most. In that painful void, I had finally found my voice, my boundaries, and my true family. The path forward wasn't perfect or easy. There were still uncomfortable family gatherings, still moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But now I faced them with a newfound clarity and confidence. The storm had washed away my illusions, but it had also cleared the ground for something new to grow, something healthier, stronger, and truer than what had come before. And for that, despite everything, I was grateful. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who consistently let you down? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most painful moments in our lives become the foundation for our greatest growth. Thank you for listening to my story today.